Hello, Mind's Eye Visual Guitar Method viewers, back for another unscripted lesson, but hopefully as concise as we can here, about intervals. And it's a much needed lesson for this channel because now, when it gets to the point in any lesson that I give where we're talking intervals and I have to stop and say, hey, if you don't get what we're saying here, well, this is what you need to know. I can now point people to this specific lesson that needs to be out on my channel. So this is all about, I think, pretty comprehensive about intervals. But it relates mostly to what you're going to hear on my channel, and should be also universal to any discussion of intervals and music theory ideas where they use this as the language to discuss the ideas. This should work for any of those situations. However, some of it may not be. There's certainly a lot missing if it boils down to certain genres, maybe like what some other terms you might need to know for classical. Um, so there, this isn't a Berkeley educated retranslation of a college based lesson, which is going to give you some pretty standard universal stuff here. This is going to be stuff that's going to really help you not only understand the basics, but in the way that we teach it here on the channel. So, that being said, let's get over what this is. Intervals, what are they? Why do you need them? I remember thinking, like, well, who needs to know all that? Just give me A, B, C, D, E, F. I'll figure it out. Tell me 12th fret, second string, and I'll figure that out. Bend the 15 up to the 17. That kind of thing did me well for a long time, getting all my favorite solos out of what used to be, I guess there still are, but music magazines. So there's a basic language, or you could even think about like what are these intervals? Well, it is, even though like the A, B, C, D, E, F, the note names are all language, but the basics, it's a kind of like you could think it's like a language with like a multi-dimensional language, uses letters and numbers, I guess. But anyways, it's a 12-bit language, which is something good to know. That means that there's only 12 notes. So I remember that is also one of the first things I really had to tell myself. You have this image in your head as a very new player that, music is so complex. There's got to be, hundreds of note choices. You look at a piano keyboard that has 88 keys, a guitar. I'm pretty sure I got 144 strings and frets here to choose from. Seems like there's more notes than you could ever imagine. However, everything you hear, no matter how fusiony and cool in a Western system, is these 12 notes. Yeah, you can go to other parts of the world where they've even established more divisions of the notes, meaning less distinction in between the individual notes for a 24-tone system. Hey, sure, that's pretty awesome and worth your time exploring, but today we're concentrating on the Western world system 12 tones. In case anybody was thinking, what are you talking about? Why are you saying 12? We have 24. Okay, so we got 12 here, so that narrows down the choices. And what are they? There's going to be a lot of terminology about each one. You can get really knowledgeable about each and every tone. And as a matter of fact, the more I jam, the more I realize, it's really about, if you're going to play a chord tone solo, well, those chord tones are explained by position. These are positions, and you're going to be able to understand what you're doing by knowing what those positions are, and then what other bits of harmony you have or melody to add, and why one choice will sound like it does. As you get good at this, and just have this in your mind when you play, you're going to start to be able to really hear this. Because I guess my point is here, there's this teaching I'm going to give you here, which is needed. It's foundational to have the information. But with music, I think you guys probably know this, you want also a sonic understanding too. So when you're looking at this chart, if you copy it down or if you pause the lesson and print or whatever you do, you can play along and hear, what some of these interval choices, what they're doing, especially. So this, I'm trying to imagine that my audience out there is really, really brand new. So in case I'm, seems like maybe to some people would think, oh, you're over explaining this or you're taking too long. Anyways, it's a balance. I'm trying not to go too long here. So line number 1, 12 notes is all we got to worry about. When you think that there's more, it makes it feel like more of an impossible task to know all this stuff. But you're going to know after you fool around with these, because there was a time I didn't know this and I thought it would be too hard to know each and every tone and what to expect. Okay, so now what we start with on line 2, basically we need every one of these tones. This represents harmony. And so, I could say this is a flat 2. I could say this is a flat 5. I could say this is a raised 7th. And it could be any of them. But right now it's just one note. There's no root note to say, oh, that's a tritone. Oh, that's a 4. And now it's a 5. And on like that. So when you... I didn't take the time to tune up before the lesson. It sounded out. Anyways, when you... so it's all about... These are all about harmony. They're going to be defined when there's a tonal gravity center. So what is a tonal gravity center? You probably already know this as a root. If I play a chord, we call that A minor. We kind of hear it as A minor. We'll hear that as G minor going to A minor. Okay? We do that because we've kind of accepted that the low note there is going to be the harmony here, developed by all these strings ringing at once, playing different notes, is going to be expressed from this lowest note here. It's going to be the tonal gravity. Now, however, that doesn't mean that you can't make a tonal gravity center higher. Like if I keep playing this high E, that starts to suggest these relationships. A raised 6, a regular 6. How do I know all that? Intervals tell me so. But later on, that was a great segue there. We will learn how I'm also thinking about my fretboard and the information I know from how these intervals relate to the fretboard. That's all the whole channel here, is how this stuff maps out geometrically here and makes it really actually easy to play the guitar if you can find all these little patterns and understand the core coming from, and the core contains this language. So, tonal gravity center comes from the root then. Either it's established as a pedal tone or the lowest note. What the bassist is doing, what the keyboard is doing. Remember, never be guitar centric. Always remember you're a guitarist in a band. Be the guy that plugs in. You're going to be the upper level chosen guitarist in a much quicker time if you don't have that guitar centric thinking that develops when everyone's like, wow, that sounds great. What scale? What scale? Tell me a scale. I need a scale. All right, so because not everything is scales. But that's a way future lessons for you guys. So beginners, hopefully, some beginners clicked on here and you want some information here. Let's get to it. So today's lesson, so in conjunction with what I'm saying, these patterns are all over your fretboard in really cool. They manifest in really cool ways to get all this stuff is actually memorable and pretty easy to grab and know. Like when you're watching that, there's one Eric Johnson lesson where he's like, well, yeah, just know your 9 in your chord and know where your 13 is. And you're thinking, man, how the heck does he know all that? Where all these numbers are, and it just looks like a bunch of frets and stuff. But it's actually, there are ways to visualize things in a way that somebody set this up to be pretty doable. Or at least it's set up that it ended up with is works for us humans with our 4 fingers. All right, so this is what it is then. We're down 1 string linearly. That's how these will play out, so you can practice them. What's that? That's the flat 2 when we talk about this one, when we talk about this one. It'd be, I wanted to just show you here, it's from, here's C to shining C, ha ha ha, but, root to root, and the intervals in between. Would have been helpful to also conceptualize this using the open string so we could have heard all the intervals, the far away ones. Can you tell what that one is? I know what it is just by hearing it. There's a sound there, but there's also this one. And then there's also this one, very recognizable and noticeable. Four, sharp 4 or flat 5. The tritone, the devil's interval. The 5. All right. So, anyways, this is what what you want to learn with these intervallions. So, moving down, here's what they are then. We're going to be discussing a root. When you see the B, that's my shorthand, easy way to make a flat note. Yeah, you can find a flat symbol in Excel, but I just use the B to be quick. So flat 2 and 2, flat 3 and 3. Let's notice right away that it looks like these number groups are occurring in groups of 2, little choice boxes of one or the other, and that's going to be important to remember. Now, one thing I think I could have done here is maybe answer the question like, well, if you know why this developed the way it did, I think it's easier to understand it. If you don't know why, then you just are memorizing this concept that came from outer space, and it's harder to remember because it's more of a jumble of random information. So what's going on here? This would have actually been very smart for me to do, and I didn't. But anyways, I just feel like I want to do it now. And then I don't know if I'm going to re-record this lesson or not, but if I do this really fast, maybe like that, and I go back to the top here, I go here and I go cut, and I go right there and I go paste, kaboom bam boom, I got room to do what I wanted to do. Ain't that crazy? Look at me go right here, live, adjusting, getting an insight into the madness here at Mind's Eye Visual Guitar Method. So it came from Do. Let's consider R is Do in Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. Then what you have is, to find those notes, it's not Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La. I mean, you might be confused to think it's that, but it's Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. Right? With my terrible singing there, but you get the idea. It came from these whole steps until there's a half step. But I'll show you here. So it came out of like Do, Re. I should have even put that here. So mi, and then they numbered them. Fa, so, la. I was gonna put an L, but we need a 6 there, and so do re mi fa, so la ti do. You can see that became all the whole numbers. And so since that became the basically like the standard for the number system, those tones became like the points of standard. That gives us then a choice with these intervals, like, so I can take the 2, but I can choose to lower it. And that gives us a deliberate way of understanding different scales. And you say, well, that's just one note. Different scales have all different notes, but not necessarily. Some of your most important changes that you could make as a composer to create moods just involves in changing one note. The difference between Dorian, A minor Dorian, and A minor Lydian. Oh, I'm sorry, A minor Dorian and A minor Aeolian is one note. So, and there's plenty more that you can discuss that share just one note, but will change the overall feel and sound. And so, anyways, that's where that comes from. So now you can understand, okay, so it's really about learning these whole tones right where you predict them at the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and then saying that we can make adjustments to those to make different sounds. Everything actually moves darker except for the 4. The choice in the 4 moves it brighter. Oh, I guess you could move the 5 up brighter, but you could also move the 5 lower. The 5 is so ubiquitous, you can move it in either direction, but we'll talk about that. So speaking of that, right here in our interval list, so we discussed the groups of 2 here, and we've got the Copilot thing making, all right, so flat 3 and the 3, then the 4 and the sharp 4, but you say, wait a minute, it says sharp 4 and flat 5, and maybe this will also answer the question if you've ever experienced that note and said, well, wait a minute, this is the note in the F sharp here in C. Last week they were calling it a sharp 4 in the scale. When I was learning The Simpsons, something or other, intro music. So anyways, but now I'm playing some other thing today and they're calling the same note a flat 5. How come? It's the same note, and who cares what you call it? Why does it need 2 different names? Because in certain situations, it helps if everybody knows what's going on and the reason why. So in certain situations, it's basically this simple. You're going to build a scale, so it doesn't really matter what you've built this far. But you do have a 3, so you've established you've got your tonal gravity, your second interval you chose 1, your third interval you've chosen 1, so you've got 1, 2, and 3 used up. Your next step in your scale-wise choices is going to be the 4, or what you chose to be the 4. So if you've chosen that raised 4, that's then called a raised 4. And then whatever you've chosen for the 5 and the 6 and the 7 and the root. But if you chose to raise the 4 and you've kept the 5, or maybe push the 5 somewhere else, you're going to keep the numbers the same. So it's really about keeping the numbers the same, or linear, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, instead of having a scale that's like 1, 2, 3, 5, this 5, that's 6. That could be more confusing to people on the fly. So this is why this was originally done. You can see it's on either side of the 5. There's that double interval possibility. So if I move the 5, it's the same information I just gave you. You'll have the 4. You'll likely have the 6, but you've got to pick one. Oh, my notes here. These things on the side here are my notes. When you see this 4 chosen as moved up, if you see it called the sharp 4, most often you're dealing with something that has to do with Lydian, because that's really the one note that takes a major scale and says, oh, no, no, this is the Lydian mode, right? It's that raised fourth. It's that anything raised makes something what? Does it make it darker or brighter? You've made a note higher. Guess what? You've lifted the mood. Did you ever know that correlation? A lot of people don't. When you lower these intervals, you create a darker situation. Phrygian has a lower interval. Mixolydian has a lower interval than standard major. Lydian, Dorian, then major and minor. They're respectively, they both have a higher interval, and it's just one of them changed higher. So anyways, but that comes up when we start teaching modes. Leave a comment if you want, an updated 2026 modal lesson. I've been thinking about doing it, but it's really not changed much from what I've already done in 2025 and even a couple other earlier lessons. So it move the 5, give it a name. You might have kept the 4 and you flatten the 5. It's a flat 5, even though it's the same note. Okay, saying that you guys are thinking that you guys have got it. Then if I lower the 6, however, now, so I've got a 4 in there. I've built my scale. I've got a 4. I've chosen one of the 5s. Maybe my scale's got a flat 5 for whatever reason. These are all deliberate choices you're going to make as a composer because you've experienced now the sounds of these scales, and you want to be able to know why this is a little different from that one, or whatever the case may be. You're explaining it. There's just multiple reasons why you're going to want to know that these are the definitions of what's been chosen sonically. So you've lowered the 5 or you've kept the 5, doesn't matter. That's why there's a question mark there, but you've chosen this note for your 6th tone of the scale. You've chosen this note instead of this note. It's a flat 6, and then you can choose whatever 7 you want and move on. That's why there's a double thing here, double interval explanation for the same note. Now you know. And your big hiccup for beginners or big confusion with intervals for beginners throwing you off is now over. Oh, and also I was going to say, when you get this this flat 5 interval, so I mentioned how if you're seeing sharp 4, the idea is probably this, you're going to hear Lydian tossed around at some point, probably. When you encounter a flat 5, a lot of times you're dealing with that interval. That's a tritone interval. You know where the tritone interval? It is coming up all the time in modern music, but you say where? I never hear anything with that weird thing. Except that, what says that one part of Twilight Zone? Help, I'm slipping into the Twilight Zone. They got an ambulance going by. Except for that, I don't know where that is in a song, unless you're listening to a lot of jazz with its 2-5-1s. The magic of playing all those cool notes is right in that song, and it's happening. The tension is built because of that tritone tension. It just wants to be resolved. What is this resolve? What is this tritone? It starts with understanding these intervals. So finally here, you might, we'll see this down below, so I won't say it much, other than you might find if no 7 was chosen, and perhaps there's some other intervals, you're packed up 1 through 6 here, but you've chosen this regular 6 with no 7, that's a double flat 7. I think it pops up more in chords. It could be in scales, but I think I'd be looking out for that more and understanding what to play. And basically, not only does it tell you, you could just say, well, why don't you just say a chord that would have a 6 in it? Well, so yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. And maybe I'm misspeaking here. Probably in chords, you would just list that as a 6. But when you're talking then the scale to go over a chord, perhaps you want to tell someone that there's no 7 in that scale. You're going right back to the tonal gravity after that 6, because that's actually the 7. It's just acting now as a double flatted 7, which it isn't usually called. But in that situation, if you've built a situation, just remember, you're the composer, you can do this, or you might be around another composer that's already done this. You are playing a double flatted 7. And that's what that does. Alright, so there's my suspected spam caller alert telling me to start explaining this stuff a little faster. Alright, so know your steps then. Basically, know these, and this is where you get sonic with everything. You get, how about, hello, we hang up. Alright, I think that's over with. Sorry about that. You know, you play these, but you also know that this interval, known as a flat 2, may also be a half step, what we have listed here. This is a whole step. It's the same as a 2. Flat 2. So they could say the Phrygian scale begins with a half step instead of a whole step. The whole step, they could also say the Phrygian scale is like a scale, but instead of having that 2, you lower it to a flat 2. Same thing as saying it has a half step. Okay, so when you go larger, you got to leap. So stepwise motion is important because it creates, very importantly, stepwise motion. A lot when you're new, you don't even realize. Like I remember like hearing this and thinking, okay, yeah, but this isn't what I need to know. I want to know about those weird notes in jazz. And doesn't seem like it, but this is the foundation of all that information. Like what step did they choose? Why does this scale tone sound like it does? Half steps, whole steps. But then after that, you get into these leaps. Now, you know that the pentatonic scale has these larger steps, and that's pretty much the maximum of a step. Once you say, well, what about, there's probably some scale out there that has that leap to a major third, probably not any higher than that for sure, or you just got too many missing notes. You just are basically at this point you're arpeggiating because you're jumping into the thirds. So that's not why it's no longer stepwise motion and not really scalar. You've already got a choice box opened up when you jump to the flat third here. So when you go to the third, then it really leaves that middle step is just begging to be filled in. So instead of, right, all of a sudden you want that middle step in there. So that's about that. But however, you do want to know the sound of this 4, the 5, the sharp 5. Hear it in the context of a chord. We'll put a sharp 5 in we'll take a fingering of a E minor, and I'm going to sharpen that 5. See if I got the right finger on there. And then we'll put the flat 7 in. Let's put the flat 7 in there first. Now, you don't need that information to write this song. But it's cool to know, why is that working? What's doing that? How can I create a scale that goes along with that? What special note am I going to put in that scale? Of course, you could just find that note and include it without knowing anything. So there's always going to be the people that are able to say, well, I don't need this theory, but knowing is, half the battle, right? So you got this understanding that was a sharp 5th, because you just know that that's your 5th. You know it by sound, and you know it by fretboard shape as well, When you double those bits of information up, you've got a solid foundation of your fretboard. So then you're going to eventually want to know down the fretboard, hey, when I build a chord, I'd like to know that that is my flat third. Sounds like something random I'd never play, but that's important to know that. Now I know that this chord has that flatted 7, but maybe I want to go melodic minor and raise that 7 with that flat third for that weird sound. Questions? All right. So moving on. So there's our know your steps by sound and by the fretboard, and that's where lessons will carry on from this one from here, and they're all over this my channel here anyways, that all things about intervals on your fretboard and how to find these things in multiple different ways. Okay, because it's all about chords, it's all about your solo, what you choose, the choices you make, if you want to step, if you want to put chromatic steps in, you want to start thinking about reasons why some work, some won't, when they work, when they don't. A lot of it is going to have this as a foundational bits of understanding. So we have like here, so let's go for triad basics. Is how when intervals, how do we get into triads from intervals? Because we want to start using, so like I can teach you, like, okay, so that's your intervals, flat 2, flat 3, flat 3, 4, sharp 4, 5. You can learn all that by rote, but it doesn't really make a difference if you're not applying any of this stuff. Like, all over your music, you're going to want to know chords and what scales to use with those chords. So, intervals to do that. So now we've also changed colors here. I've got more of like now I move into something more intuitive here, whereas I'm using kind of colors that will have an idea related to their usage. So up here, yeah, I used green, and it really would have been better off to keep it consistent with this 5 down below here, the 5 interval. But green is like the go-to, helps stand out, and we wanted to talk about focus on everything related to tonal gravity, so there's our green note. However, when it comes to intervals, your root is your gravity. So I think about gravity, I think about roots of trees, I think about the earth, I think about everything in giant ball of dirt in space. So root is like a root is going to be, idea-wise, in a solo context, I'm going to kind of want to go to a root for 2 reasons. If I've been done something that maybe sounds a little bit, maybe I'm in improv mode, and I've done something that's a little bit, this would be something that's not composed. I've done something that's a little bit outside, risky, maybe threw a mistake in there. On the next chord, if I go, home, or even perhaps on that chord, if I can get back to full home base, which is the root, then I'm going to sound back inside pretty quick. So if I've done something over this, that sounded pretty terrible, obviously, but because there's no context there. But coming out of that 5 in a 2-5-1, I'm gonna be all over the place. And there I got into the 3rd. But if I'm really, you knew when I got into that C, when I slammed into that root note right there, from being outside of on that 5 chord that preceded that C. Alright, so there's 2-5-1 lessons on this channel, in case you may have gotten lost there. But so harmony basics, we've got the root, and then the 5th you'll find you're gonna always hear about this 5th, so it's time to really nail that one down first. It's like the king and queen there, the shell around that makes up a chord, the harmonic shell, I like to think of it as, because you basically got the guts in the middle here that are defining that difference between a chord that is perceived as, you might not put an emotion on that until you hear it against this one with one choice different. In that group of thirds, we lowered it. And now we have something that maybe sounds so which one would you emotionally align with? Receiving a bonus, a sunny day, a happy outcome, or a rainy day and a sad outcome and a problem. So that is the emotional power of these intervals, and what is right in the very ground floor of the like harmonic information you hear on a daily basis in music. This is the very ground floor of all of that for all intents and purposes. So we got the root at Brown. What's great for what goes right along, in a color idea with that root, green vegetation. I'm always going to go to that 5. That's a great voice to lead into to create that stability, that change, that rock solid feel as the line changes into changes into another chord. And rock is definitely, I've noticed a lot of players will work into the 5 of the new chord. Jazz tends to work into the either 3rd and the 7th. I think that's kind of somewhat genre specific there, but it doesn't have to hold true. I mean, ask Larry Carlton about the solo in Kid Charlemagne, and we'll find some opposition. But anyways, I'm rambling out there. So after the root and the 5, we discussed that 3 in there, colorized it a little lighter, a little, brighter, happier for the major 3. So just something to think about there. Now you know your first choice box really has been accomplished. So now what you kind of have there is you also have a process of elimination here. Whenever you're working with a chord and some music, you want to start to think about a solo. You basically want notes that will work, and then you have, once you establish, every note you establish that will work is one less that won't work. So just by process of elimination here, we've got 3 notes. We now have 9 more notes to try to harness here, and you'll see here coming up it gets pretty easy. So I mean, now on a basic level, if you've chosen one of these chord tones, you can basically eliminate this box here. So actually now we eliminate 4 tones, because as a general sense of improvisation, you're going to stick with the, especially for the meat and potatoes of the chord, you're going to stick with this chosen. Your line is going to have that, may or may not, but it's going to at least not have, for the most part. I know there's a lot of excuses in here, but for this major third. So what it becomes is you've basically eliminated that choice, but a slick player will find ways to use that as an option, but that's like a last option. That's I'll show you kind of, that'll make more sense going down the road, but you basically are eliminating one with the choice of one. But like for example, it's a cool move in blues to actually, so here, if this C major chord is going on, or what is this? This is C major. No, this is, C major. If this chord is going on, I've chosen the chord tones and an extra note there to jam with. right? And so, but I might go. That's the flat third, hammering to that major third. So you can find ways to use these eliminated notes. So it's not, it's music, everything's to taste. All these are spices, so there's no wrong spice. It's just how do you want to make the dish and how strong of a spice do you want. So, moving down the road here, we kind of, let's say we got this triad jazz understood. And so now, no pun intended with the jazz comment there, we got the sevens here, which will step you more into chords with the idea towards jazz, right? The jazz genre. So seventh chords and symbols. What we want to know are these little symbols with the triads. Now, there's one more note you can add, because look at what's done here. Here we have the root right here, all the way on this side, right? And so we've got some stepwise motion through the scale here, if we were creating a scale, but we're missing kind of a bunch of information, harmonic information, right in this side of the scale. So what if we took one more tone as a chord tone? Like, will one of these chords fit, or tones fit as a chord tone? And what tends to actually happen is choosing one of these sevens is commonly heard as a great extension, a very accepted. Even though it's an extension, it's like your first level of note that you could still consider a chord tone, especially if that's ringing out in the chord. It rings well as a chord tone, even though almost any of them will ring as a chord tone. It just depends on what effect you want. And very commonly we have these sevenths as the extra tone, which is great because it gives us another choice box to eliminate, give us one choice, eliminate the other one, thereby making it even easier to play. As a matter of fact, I can show you that from here. It's actually become quite easy to handle any of the other, once you've got your arpeggio down that you're playing in, and you've got all your strong tones, cool. It's going to be the first key to making your improv sound pretty cool. But it will have a limited amount of flavor. It'll be the basic dish. Think about these as like a, like what's a food I could think of? All that's coming to mind, I'm an Italian, I'm going to think of spaghetti. You can have some nice, whatever pasta you chose. I like rigatoni because I've always hated spaghetti. So we put rigatoni on there, and then we just get a sauce on there. Like a tomato sauce. It looks like an Italian dish of spaghetti. We put a little meatball in there and sprinkle a little cheese on there. But if the sauce doesn't have any spice on there, it's going to taste like the dish, but it's going to be about as basic as it can get. And if Joey from Joey and Tony's place comes along and gives you the dish with you got the mingua, got the oregano's, pepperoni, got whatever here, sausage, it's gravy. We're from New Jersey. Oh my God, I'm getting crazy here. Sorry. Too much information, but if they got a good sauce on there with lots of different, all the expected spices in there, hey, you're going to have a real dazzling dish. And then maybe somebody comes up with a little something new. They put a little peanut butter in there. No, that's chili. Right? Yeah, mess around. Put an Italian with peanut butter. We're going to kick your ass off. Sorry. But you put some mushrooms in there, and now it has an even new flavor, right? That complements the sauce and doesn't piss off the older Italians, right? All right. So jokes aside, I can joke like that. Root, in this example, a flat third, a 5. Now here's what you need to know with intervals and seventh chords. The 7 is the spice that it's going to be very commonly associated with the flat third. Why? Because, you have a choice here. You have once again, a raised choice or a lowered choice. Well, we have the lowered third. So guess which choice here is going to sound the most congruent with that lowered third is the lowered seventh. It's going to sound congruent. Now, we could also raise the seventh If we do, we're going to need to tell somebody that we're doing that, because people are going to generally expect that minor chord comes with a minor 7. Here's why. All three minor chords from any major key includes a variety of chords: the major, the minor, and one diminished. Let's not talk. We'll throw away the one diminished. We'll talk about 3 majors and 3 minors. Well, the majors, we're going to show you, will have a little difference, but the minor chords, the 3 minors, always have that flat 5. Sorry, that flat 7. So those sound like they go together because those are all coming out of the key of C. The A minor, the 6, the Dorian, the 2. These 2 that I'm talking about, this is the interval stuff that you usually get lost on that you're learning here. This is, yes, the second tone. The 2 is number 2. C from the C scale, C is number 1, D is 2. And we'll talk about chord scales, and when we do, you're going to need this as a foundation. And when we talk about chord scales, is the next thing you need to know. You're going to understand how the scale can produce major and minor, because I know that will sound confusing to beginners that don't know anything. See, I remember being that person, and that's who I give lessons to. So we got all these coming out of the scale. They all have that predictable flat 7. No matter what key I choose, they all have that flatted 7th. Now, here's that raised 7th. I think I showed you that earlier when we were talking about that. Some other note there, but... See, that's a totally different sound. Now, in my notes here, I said it comes from the MM scale. That would be from a totally different scale. If you see that, generally speaking, as you get real familiar with this, that'll also clue you in that you're probably dealing with the melodic minor scale, or guess what's going to work really slick over that chord with this unique sound, that you want to preserve that sound in the line that you play. Then you're going to want to play that melodic minor scale that will include that raised 7th. If it has all the other in-between choices that you like. Alright, so that being said, we don't have a checkbox there because it's not as common. That's going to be common. This is uncommon enough to where, like, it's telling you you're not in the major scale anymore. So if your music is in a major scale, you may not see this chord in 99% of the music you're playing if it's major or the regular minor stuff. And once again, regular minor is going to have that flatted 7. So now you know, and why you might... We're also talking about this, some special symbols you'll see around this 7th, and I think it's part of our interval explanation here, so that's why it's included. Root note, major third, 5. So now we're dealing with a major chord. Well, most commonly, we'll start with the most common, is going to be the 7, and you don't need to tell someone it's a raised 7th, because very most commonly 2 out of the 3 chords in the major scale are going to be have this raised 7th. So right, so there's our difference there. We've got G with that major 7. It's the one just behind the root. We'll go down to F and play that there. Right? Now play the same chord up on G. And it sounds a little bit like something drifted away there. Because in the scale, well, that's the note that is normally in the scale there. So you'd have that. So you have the... And that gives it that unresolved pull back to the 1 of the key. Moving on. Before we get lost in sidetrack information here. Root, so we got that, okay, the major seventh is the most common. We kind of went over the fact that, so there's a dominant seventh chord. So if you see G7, this gets confusing for new people at this, while we're got a little spot here to teach about it. This is the fifth chord in G. I'm sorry, in C. So C, D, E, F, G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's the 5 chord. The 5 chord is a G. C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so we got that G. That's why it's always called the 5 chord, but someone's also going to be calling it the 7 chord, because you're going to refer to that like a G7. So if you were playing this major 7, you would see M7 to tell you, because you need this information, because which 7th does this chord have is going to be, important. That totally changes its function in the music in a very important way. That's totally all about your soloing choices. And you just don't know this stuff when you're new, so it just doesn't seem like it's a case. It doesn't seem relevant or important, but it's really everything about the choices that people are making out there and where they come from. It's either sonically, if you're lucky enough to have the ear, and earlier I mentioned, like, maybe with a little gray area about the people that, well, they don't need theory, or that's their claim that they don't need theory. It's about that certain people do have a stronger ear than other people. Hence me, I really don't have a strong ear for music, especially a while back. Now I do hear things and pick up on certain things now that, and it's just neat to train your brain to do this. For me it is. I like it. So G7, even if it's a longer note name like an E flat, if it's got that 7 behind it, you've lowered that 7th and you're playing that dominant chord, which is coming from the 5th of the scale. Generally speaking, you'll hear this as the 5 chord. You'll interpret it as a 5 going to 1 in a lot of ways. Even if it's not coming from your original scale, it's a 5 based on where it's going most of the time. However, there is a way for me to, let's say I want to go to A major, and I was just at B minor. So I can put that as a weird step in between. And it has a name to do so. It's some kind of substitution, but let's not get sidetracked. All right, so moving on from there, we got root. Choice of thirds. You can do this move with a flat third or a major third. We know what that does. We've got the 5th in there, and we'll have a 6 in there. The neat thing about this 6 is it still makes a nice conjunction or kind of a 4th tone to a major or even a minor chord, but even mostly a major chord, without really sounding like you've omitted the 7, and it leaves the 7 as a choice now that you can alter in case the chord, if it moves from, if in the piece of music you're playing an A major 7 becomes an A dominant 7, it leaves you the choice to make that change in the music. Let me play a C chord here. There it is, arpeggiated. Get some C in your ear, right? Shake it around, get that seawater out. Okay, so there's that 6. Sounds nice, makes a nice conjunction, a nice kind of accomplice as a go-to note without really standing out. It really sounds like it can still be part of the chord naturally. Now here's the 7. So that changes my C chord more to a... Whoops. You can see it matches that flatted 7 note. We've got the 7 right there. How do we know that? We know our intervals. We know the intervals now on our fretboard, right? So, but the 6 is cool because it does this trick where it allows us to play ideas over to solo over major or minor chords with one shape, as long as you include the magic of this 6. Now that won't make any sense to someone who's new. That's okay. Just don't feel like you just got lost there if you don't know what anyone's talking about there. No one probably does until they watch that lesson, which is one of the recent lessons. Look for something about Barry Harris and you'll start to see me discuss the value of this 6, right? Or ending noodling, all that, my recent lessons. All right, so root, flat 3rd, flat 5th, flatted 7th. That's going to be, you're going to see it symbolized with this symbol. This circle is diminished. When you put a line through it, it's saying half diminished. Okay, that makes some sense. And the spelling of a half diminished chord, that means it's not fully diminished. So notice here, we've basically what this means is we've taken a regular 3rd, and of course we don't normally say it like this. We just say we would choose the flatted 3rd, but we've diminished that 3rd, also diminishing the 5th, and we haven't diminished this. We have a 7 that normally goes with the flat 3rd, so technically that's not diminished. So only so that you could consider the chord, the first half, the triad, is diminished, but the second half is not diminished. That's why it would be called a half diminished chord. Hold on, pony. Don't diminish that flat 7 just yet. All right? So that's that, and it would be notated as, say it was a C, we were in C. It's got a flat 3rd, so it would be minor. It's got the 7 in it, so there's our 7. But we're telling people it's also a flat 5. A C minor 7 flat 5 is the interval way to tell someone about this chord. But the shorthand way is to say, well, that's half diminished. Oh, okay. Let me play you a minor chord and flatten the 5. Like a minor 7 chord with a flat 5. And yeah, I'll play the same chord. Cool. So now we have the same concept here. We have the root, the flatted 3rd, the flatted 5, and then the double flatted 7. So now we've diminished that 7 because we're still considering it that 4th note of our chord, which is generally some kind of 7, a root 3, 5, and 7. Your choice of 6 is still available in between the flat 5 and this double flatted 7. So that's why it's called a double flatted 7. You'll see it with a full diminished circle, so you'll know if you see the 7, it's your 7 chord, but everything has gone diminished. So, or it would be C dim 7 or just C symbol 7. C diminished 7. So now you know your chord symbols and why, what is the meaning of all that. It's the understanding, the basis of the understanding is in intervals. Would be like a nice foundational idea system to explain what the heck is all this and how is it going to matter to you in a solo. So you basically could play, you could start by playing minor, but you're going to need to know where your 5 is, so you can always flat it. And you'll discover ways to just make that happen with a complete series of notes or whatever. As a matter of fact, if you notice, since this is also the root right here, you'll notice that there is a perfect actual skip of intervals in between each one of these notes. This is when you hear, oh, this chord is symmetrical. Symmetrical in what kind of way? Doesn't sort of look symmetrical on the fretboard, but what does that even mean? I mean, isn't this shape, could that be symmetrical to this shape? I don't know, right? This is what it really means when you see the intervals spaced out in, with a real idea. Then you can say, oh, okay, there's a perfect choice of two in between each of these choices, and there's this symmetrical symmetry. Now what that does, though, is it makes it so that there's one shape across the fretboard, so you could theoretically change this shape. You say, well, how did you choose each one? Well, each one of these notes skips those two notes. It's basically moving 1, 2, 3. So if I take that chord, if every one of those choices moves up 3, then I just have to move the whole shape, keep the shape exactly the same. Every other shape will change to some new configuration, but this, all the notes follow that and make that sound that you've heard. You say, well, that's useful for some old, black and white film from the 30s with someone stuck on some trolley tracks. Oh yeah. But so you don't think it's relevant to any modern music, but it's right in the heart of the Barry Harris method. It's all the deep jazz stuff. It has something to do with this somewhere. You will have to find out where and watch this channel. But you can even do things like this. I don't know. We got lost there, but you get the idea. They're all symmetrical until you're on camera and you're trying to show off and you look like an idiot. All right, so so now we can see, and here I've colorized the kind of choices now, because this becomes another fret. This kind of morphs into an actual fretboard lesson that I'm going to keep this short and not go into today. It's already, I'm sure, gone on an hour, but we've got root. What you see here is like you got, when we choose the root, we chose our triad guts there, we chose our triad shell there, and then it just gives us a choice of what do we want to do with the 4s, what do we want to do with the 2, what do we want to do with the 6, or the 7. But that's actually not why that's coming down the road here. What I did make this for is now, sorry, I got a little off track there, not reading my notes here. This is about extensions. There's another series of intervals you're going to hear, and then you're going to tell me, hey, Mark, you said there was only 12. I got people talking about flat 13. Where did this note come from? Is there a 15? Is there a 19? What is going on here? No. To do this, you can easily consider like a piano keyboard. Here's all the 12 notes of a piano keyboard. You can think and go, oh yeah, I guess it kind of, but keyboard does have those black keys arranged like that. Okay, and then there's these other ones down the road, and if you look closely, maybe you never noticed this about a piano keyboard, it's this thing repeating over and over and over. The black keys aren't all random, they're in a repeating pattern. So if I grab my chord in between this C and that C, those are all my intervals, 1 through 7, right? But if I, especially on a piano, it's not totally as easy on a guitar, and a guitarist, because of that, can actually substitute some of these original intervals. But that's a tangent there. If I grab one of these notes from this other part of the keyboard higher up, so I don't think I have my keyboard plugged in there. So, for example, like this is like a 4 here. Now this is the octave So this might be considered, now my chord would have an 11. If I fit everything in here and played that, but maybe I leave out the third just so I can play it. Still tending to sound a little bit, what do you call that? Suspended, like a suspended chord. So it's kind of still a 4, but if I were to play it down here, then we're talking an 11. A sharp 11, right? But obviously no one plays a chord with a stretch like that in it unless you're Allan Holdsworth, right? So either way, when you're building chords, if someone says this chord has a ninth, you are playing the same exact note as a 2. As a matter of fact, just learn this. I kind of realized this for myself. Nobody told me this, and I just use this all the time. Especially not, I don't anymore because now I just get it. But in the beginning, all I had to tell myself was like, this chord's got a flat what? A 9? Oh, how do I find a 9? What's a 9? Where's a 9? It seems lost in space. No, you just need a 2. And it corresponds, the 9 is the 2. So the flat 9 is the flat 2. The 4 is now an 11 because, and you might, let's say someone is asking right now, where do they come up with all these numbers? Why is 2 9 and why isn't 2 4? It doesn't make any sense. Well, if we count these standard intervals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the root, the octave is 8, like an octagon. Oh, an 8-sided structure. 8 notes, octagon. 8. It's 8. It's the 8th note. All right. So the next note after that, if we go choose something higher, is going to be a 9. It's no longer a 2 anymore. A 2 is back here next to the root. I don't know. I was just trying to play a root and a 2. Close by doesn't sound great, except maybe down here in a chord might sound kind of cool. So there's an interval of a whole step, but it's not necessarily a 2 to the root. Anyways, okay, so it's a 9 if you're playing it far away from the root. So beyond that, then so the thirds stay the same. A third is going to be so strongly a third that a third stays the same no matter where you play it for the most part. And then so a fourth though is like an optional. It's one of them these are also the step tones in between your chord tone choices, right? So these areas all offer these like melodic choices or extensions or colors. A lot of people will put them as. So the 4 is the regular scale tone, so that's considered the 11. We could sharpen the 4, or way up in the chord we could sharpen the 11. And if you need here's a good one. They say the Dorian scale, right? Even though I hate that term, there's a Dorian mode, but let's just say we've called this pattern a Dorian scale. We call it that because it's got that raised 6. Because a normal minor pattern would have this flatted 6. That's 6 notes away, or 6 scale steps away from the root. So we've got that tone in there. Then now maybe I want a chord that will work in there, or there's a minor chord going on, and it's got a color to it. It's got an extension. It's got a 13 on it. It's a minor 13 chord. What is that telling you? It's kind of like wants to play, it's like a Dorian sounding chord. But if I have a flat 13 with a minor, it's going to be an Aeolian sounding chord, because we know that those are if you can make these correspondences once you know the larger ideas, the interval language here is what can clue you in to connecting these ideas and go, oh, okay, if this is that, then like I would never have thought that when I, years ago when I discovered modes, I still didn't know anything about chords and chord extensions because I really wasn't dealing with any jazz stuff yet. So you just don't find these, fun extensions until you get into some hipper music, and then now I can see like, okay, this it's a possibility. I don't have to do anything. Couldn't might not be bothered to use these intervals at all. But if I have like a, if I want to kind of suggest Dorian and I'm writing the chords, maybe I'll throw in that 13 color in there. If I know that a keyboard is playing this and I'm being asked to solo, I can make my adjustment to my scale like that. There's all different perspectives as well, and musical angles you could be coming at this information from, and it works from all these different angles to line ideas up and line sounds up, so you don't have a note that sounds, why does that note sound wrong? Why does this one sound good? Well, who knows? Well, no, there is a known reason, and you can, a lot of people like the mystery. Some people are afraid to lose that, what they perceive as the excitement of this mystery of music. But I'm totally different. Learning this unlocked the mystery to me. Now I can harness it like a magician that can make a new trick. So, anyways, but a good musician, a magician never tells you their tricks. So I guess I'm being a bad musician here because I'm telling you my tricks. So we've got the we've got all our extensions figured out now. So it's just the same as these other notes. And if I'm comping, so here's a 1, 3, 5 in C. This chord has a 13 in it, which I know is a 6. So 1, 3, 5. My next scale tone is 6. So there's my 6 right there. So I might just comp to keep my guitar on point, but kind of in a certain part of the mix of the music. I don't want, maybe at that moment I don't want to stand out, I don't want to jump out, I don't want to be on top of a soloist that's soloing. But for that 6 chord, I might play that instead of this. Maybe not. So, but it's possible, even though, like, with like the chord of the moment. Maybe it's getting covered by the piano. It's got the nice lush 13th chord in there, but you, the guitarist, just stick with that 6 in there, and you'll still be on point with a corresponding sounding note in your chord. All right, so and then just the key of C, kind of that do re mi fa sol la ti do thing I was talking about earlier. We can see how that developed into the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I should have just scrolled down, I guess. And then when you make adjustments to these, your root is your root, so the 1 stays the 1 in all cases. So that way, if I'm moving something up to that, but I'm still playing my root, or that's still my musically suggested tonal gravity center, then that choice is going to be a lowered 2. That's a 2. And if you play the 2 and the flat 2, for everyone like, well, what if you do that, dude? Then how are you going to have 2 2s? Well, then you could consider that a 1, a 2, and a double flat 3 if you really needed to explain that scale. But you've also just moved what? There's a name for that. It's chromatically. You just are moving chromatically instead of once you get those 2 half steps together. That's not too common for scale ideas, so that is just now becoming chromatic. Doesn't mean you can't be the composer that comes up with the piece of music that does that exact thing. That's possible. Just what idea can you convince is all music is about, and that's why music theory explains what sounds good, but it's not rules to what sound good. What sounds good is whatever you can convince an audience of for your idea, for your musical idea. And that's where like a big disconnect, I think, is in this idea and the argument of like, well, is music theory valid? Do I even really need it? Just if you want to communicate, you learn a language. Do you need to communicate on a trip to, a quick trip to China? Well, that's, I don't know, just for me, because I'm here and I'm not from China, so but I guess the examples are throwing everything into a weird tangent here. So, anyways, and this all corresponds. Then don't confuse it though with your letter names of notes and then the choices in between that give you the A sharp and B flat. That is another way that you need to sometimes define music and talk about it at a note name level. But you can still correspond it all to tonal gravity. Where's your choice of tonal gravity in here, and then where are your corresponding intervals? Always the same on your fretboard, and that's what will be next lesson. The magic of this interval geometry all over your fretboard. There's a ton of, actually not a ton, but there's some key secret shapes that are already on lessons in this channel. But if you haven't found them yet, put it in the comments that you'd like to see that lesson coming up next, and maybe we'll make a part 2. So guys, thank you for watching. As always, think about donating, because this whole show here is like behind the scenes here. We're in double jeopardy. There's a financial situation going on with my work, and I don't have like really any appropriate income happening right now. And let me know if I need to change to give me confidence to be a local guitar teacher. But I've got to try to press on with what I'm doing, but it's about to make me fully broke. And so if you can check out one of the links, if this meant anything to you, put something in the donation dish there, buy me a coffee there, because we need to always rush to more coffee. Yep. And check out the store for your studio. You got a cool studio that you're setting up, got all your cool lights up, could use a cool tapestry on the wall that has like some cool psychedelic pictures from that related to the logo on this channel. Check out Mind's Eye T Public Store. The link is still working down in the description below. So thank you for watching. So hopefully this wasn't a 2-hour lesson I was trying to avoid, but it probably was. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time, and let us know things in the comments about things that you questions and what you want to see. But that's the extent of everything you'll find on this channel is here, so copy this down. Maybe scream at me to make these printable, and maybe I'll learn to do that. But know your intervals, and you're going to know exactly what we're talking about all the time on this channel about everything, and you're just going to propel yourself into the music scene. It's just a ladder rung that you're climbing higher than the next guitarist that doesn't want to do this, or is going to sit there and spending years putting it off, and until they finally realize they need it and make a YouTube channel 20 years later. All right, thank you for watching. Have a great day.